Coming up. That's right. The poll oversampled Democrats by 14%, even though it's fairly widely accepted among analysts that working-class Trump voters who stayed home for the 2018 midterm election are more likely to turn out in 2020 with the presidency on the line. I don't know how the poll sampling ended up with 14% more Democrats than Republicans, but the number is so startling that it should have been disclosed up front, early in the poll reporting, not buried deep in the body of the results. So why wasn't it disclosed? You tell me. If a poll with startling results prominently discloses the makeup of the poll sample, which may explain the surprising results and make them not so startling after all, will the poll get more or less coverage? Will the poll get more clicks or less clicks? Well, there's your answer. Welcome back to Political Spirits. I'm your host, Franklin Rye. We still stand for the proposition that the left and the right should have a few drinks and talk. Compromise is not a requirement. If those discussions result in us changing or even abandoning our positions, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too. We just need to talk to each other. In that way, we can unify through speech. And if the discussion becomes a bit heated, at the end of the night, we should still be able to split up the bar tab and be on our way. So what are we going to talk about this week? Let's talk for a moment about a conference that I just attended. It was called AmpFest. The AMP stands for American Priority, an organization which describes itself as dedicated to developing and holding educational events that, quote, support the First Amendment, highlight American culture and values, as well as solutions to issues, close quote, America faces. It also states that it supports the, quote, America First but Not Alone agenda, close quote. The conference was held at the Trump Doral Resort near Miami. I'm just going to give you a brief debrief regarding some of the issues discussed and my impression of some of the speakers. As you can probably tell from the description of the mission of the organization, specifically the reference to America First but Not Alone, it was heavily attended by ardent supporters of President Trump. That was most apparent, of course, during the speech by Donald Trump Jr., which I'll get to in a moment. The presentation which left me the most concern was regarding the technology giants and a discussion of subjects such as manipulation of search results to achieve social or political ends. I made reference to that subject in an earlier podcast episode, but I'm now convinced it represents an even greater threat to our freedom than I thought before. I'll be delving into that more on future podcasts, but I want to leave you with just one thought. My previous discussion in that regard addressed the congressional testimony of Dr. Epstein and his contention that Google has affected the results of elections around the world through manipulation of search algorithms. What I never really focused on before was the extent to which manipulation of search results impacts opinions on social and political issues. It is that much broader risk, the risk of that handful of influential tech companies and tech insiders effectively controlling the thinking of significant portions of society, which deserves more discussion and which I'll be teeing up on future episodes. The observation I made regarding the crowd at this conference is one of the same observations I made at the Trump kickoff rally in Orlando. Notwithstanding all of the name-calling, finger-pointing, and disparagement by much of the media and several of the Democratic candidates for the Democratic presidential nomination, I saw absolutely no evidence of any racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, or any other ism or phobia the left has been able to come up with. I did see a crowd expressing vigorous support for free speech, freedom of religion, and the Second Amendment, and responding joyfully to any mention of the achievements of the Trump presidency, the low unemployment for all segments of the American population, and responding proudly and joyfully to any exhibition of patriotism. It was, in those respects, just like a Trump rally. Just a couple more takeaways. The high point of the conference was Donald Trump Jr.'s speech. I saw him speak about a year ago, and he was certainly good, but the only way I can describe his speech from the AmFest conference is on fire. He has stepped it up to an incredible extent. Now, perhaps it's just because he has so many targets, what with the astonishingly leftist positions of many of the Democratic candidates for the nomination and the revelations regarding Hunter Biden's sweetheart deals in the Ukraine, but I think it's more than that. I think he's honed his speaking craft through all the recent engagements for the campaign, and he's virtually perfected his comedic timing. I've heard a lot of politicians speak over the years, and as I noted in an earlier episode, they often have the ability to speak endlessly on a particular subject. I used the example of the speech I attended years ago by John Kerry, but not many of them are very funny. Donald Trump Jr., on the other hand, has developed a comedic shtick that is about as entertaining as you're going to hear from a politician. His father's funny, but in a different way. Trump Jr. has a fast delivery that will serve him well on the campaign trail. If he fulfills the nightmares of Democratic leadership and decides to carve out a political career for himself. Now, I'm not predicting that. Who knows what the future holds for Donald Trump Jr.? I just know that he certainly has the speaking skills to get the job done if he ever takes a political path for himself. One last comment about the AmFest conference. I appreciate it when a conference brings together unusual speakers on subjects outside of what you typically hear at these kinds of events. One of the breakout sessions was a panel discussion entitled Red Carpet Censorship, about the difficulty of being a conservative in Hollywood and how many in Hollywood keep their conservative politics secret. The speakers included actor, singer, director Robert Davi, writer, comedian, speechwriter Evan Syed, recording artist Ricky Rebel, and journalist, conservative film critic, and radio show co-host Christian Toto, who hosts the Hollywood in Toto podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. Christian Toto is one of my favorite podcasters. His podcasts, articles, and movie reviews are always thought-provoking and entertaining. In discussions afterward with Robert Davi and Christian Toto, I touched upon whether Hollywood studios have ever been sued for political discrimination against stars. I'll be digging into that question and reporting back to you in the future with what I find. Bottom line, if you like political conferences, AmFest is very definitely worth your consideration. Next topic. Health insurance proposal. Let's talk about health coverage. I acknowledge that political solutions regarding health coverage are hard to figure out. There's nothing simple about it. What I'm going to propose is not some complex top-to-bottom reworking of the system. Instead, I'm going to focus on one thorny problem: the lack of widespread competition to provide insurance health coverage. The biggest problem with healthcare is that the cost is skyrocketing. We all understand, or we all should understand, that the best mechanism for reducing cost is the competitive marketplace. I submit that a fully populated competitive marketplace doesn't exist for health insurance in some parts of the country, and in other parts of the country it could easily be made more competitive. So what do I propose? I propose that group-rated insurance policies be made available through membership organizations. If we broaden the offering, including offerings across state lines, the price should fall dramatically. Moreover, doing so would allow employees of small companies to obtain affordable coverage when their employers don't provide it, and it would allow flexibility for those who want to try to start their own businesses or otherwise work outside of the traditional employment environment. So what do I mean by membership organizations? Well, think about this. How much more value would Amazon be offering if membership in Amazon Prime included not only free shipping for Amazon products and a huge library of free videos, but also the option to purchase group-rated health insurance? How much more value would a Sam's Club membership or some other form of Walmart membership or an AARP membership or an NRA membership or Bass Pro Shops Reward Club membership or the Chamber of Commerce or the National Federation of Independent Businesses, or any one of a seemingly endless list of membership organizations that could offer group-rated insurance benefits from insurance companies with which they would contract. The potential for those membership groups to expand the size of their membership for purchasing their products would be enormous, and I have no doubt huge numbers of them would line up to offer such a benefit. The end result? Widespread availability of group-rated health insurance at a much more affordable cost than Obamacare for those not receiving large Obamacare subsidies. So why hasn't something like this been offered already? 2 reasons. 1, it butts up against the entrenched bureaucrats in the insurance departments of the various states. They don't want anybody to be able to go around them. 2, it doesn't result in more citizens being dependent on government benefits. It is that dependence on government benefits which helps ensure votes for the party most committed to offering those benefits. The last thing candidates from that party want is widespread availability of more affordable insurance through commercial enterprises, in this case, membership purchasing groups. Do I think I'll see such a proposal advanced and passed? I doubt it, but you never know. Next topic. Smoke-filled impeachment. Do you remember the phrase that used to be used to describe the backroom deals that were done that undermined the concept of our democracy, that flew in the face of the simple civics lessons that talked about how bills were passed, like the old Saturday morning Constitution rock videos? The phrase that basically conveyed that it wasn't the testimony taken in a public hearing that mattered. What mattered is what happened separate from and presumably before that hearing. What mattered wasn't a primary election, but rather the meeting of the party bigwigs. It all happened in the smoke-filled room, where those in power decided what would be done and presumably planned the dog and pony show that would be fed to the public to give the impression that actually hearings that mattered were engaged in. Well, you certainly don't hear the phrase smoke-filled anymore. No smoking zones have moved well past the restaurant and the airplane. But you do hear about the back rooms, and everybody knows the deals are done. But call me a Boy Scout for thinking that the back room is not something that would ever be accurately used to describe gathering of the evidence for an impeachment. Call me a Boy Scout for thinking that the open, fair, and just process that was used for the gathering of evidence for the impending impeachment of Richard Nixon and the gathering of evidence for the impeachment of Bill Clinton would be the process used for the gathering of evidence for the impeachment of Donald Trump. Call me a Boy Scout for thinking that notwithstanding the political polarization of the country and the seemingly never-ending investigations of the sitting president, an open, fair, and just process would be used to gather the evidence to pursue an impeachment. That the will of 63 million voters spread out across the country to create a major electoral college win for the candidate of their choice would not be overturned through a secret gathering of evidence in back rooms, open only to a handful of Republicans, with prohibitions on their revealing the information to their Republican colleagues. And if the Republicans violated those restrictions, they'd be subject to potential ethics investigations in the House of Representatives. But, not surprisingly, the Democrats' preferred spin on specific pieces of information from specific witnesses would be leaked to their propaganda ministries, otherwise known as the news media. If you don't care about having a functioning republic, if you don't care about the will of the people actually being implemented, if you don't care about the news media actually speaking truth to power instead of functioning as a mouthpiece of one party alone, then you can say what's happening is brilliant. Nancy Pelosi gets to conduct what she has labeled an impeachment inquiry without having a floor vote so that her Democrat congresspersons in districts won by Trump won't have to go on the record with a vote to open an impeachment inquiry, so that she apparently can avoid having Republicans issue subpoenas for witnesses in the proceedings, perhaps so that she can incredibly continue to maintain the anonymity of what the media and the Democrats call a whistleblower but who is probably more appropriately labeled a confidential source to the Democrat members of the Intelligence Committee and its leader, Adam Schiff. If you don't care about a functioning republic and you're a Democrat, you might say, well, that gives us everything we want. We can feed the media pieces of information rather than the whole picture of testimony through leaks, and rest assured that our media sycophants will run with those pieces spun perfectly to fit their anti-Trump narrative. And the more of those pieces the media gets, the more believable poll results will seem, even when their underlying fundamentals show something deeply disturbing. I'm talking about the recent Fox News poll showing that 51% of those polled want the president impeached and removed from office. That's a shocking number. You want to know what's a more shocking number? Buried in the fundamentals of the poll, which you have to go to the original story to find and then dig down page after page after page to discover that 14% more of the respondents were voting in the Democratic primary versus the Republican primary. That's right. The poll oversampled Democrats by 14%, even though it's widely accepted among analysts that working-class Trump voters who stayed home for the 2018 midterm election are more likely to turn out in 2020 with the presidency on the line. I don't know how the poll sampling ended up with 14% more Democrats than Republicans, but that number is so startling that it should have been disclosed up front, early in the poll reporting, not buried deep in the body of the results. So why wasn't it disclosed? You tell me. If a poll with startling results prominently discloses the makeup of the poll sample, which may explain the surprising results and make them not so startling after all, will the poll get more or less coverage? Will the poll get more clicks or less clicks? Well, there's your answer. Next topic. A colonialist pineapple under the sea. Short final topic here. You may recall that on a prior episode I argued that companies which pull their ads from shows in response to political pressure, even though the politics of those shows, such as Tucker Carlson Tonight, for example, are known in advance, those companies are aligning themselves with efforts to suppress speech. As I noted, it makes no difference whether the show is on the left, such as Rachel Maddow, for example, or on the right, such as Tucker or Hannity, for example. If the company can't take political heat, it shouldn't advertise on political shows. Somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I said that they should only run their ads on Nickelodeon, because nobody could have a problem with SpongeBob. Well, I guess I underestimated the capacity of the left to have a problem with a cartoon sponge. As reported on FoxNews.com on April 11 in an article by Nate Day, as well as multiple other sites, according to a University of Washington professor, Holly M. Barker, SpongeBob is a violent, racist colonizer. Yep, you heard that right. Our lovable little sponge, so dedicated to the assembly of the perfect Krabby Patty and infatuated with everybody's favorite undersea-dwelling squirrel, Sandy Cheeks, our little SpongeBob is a racist, at least according to the latest example of the lunacy that passes for scholarship on the left. So how on earth did this professor reach this conclusion? Well, she speculates that Bikini Bottom is actually intended to represent the Bikini Atoll, the islands that the U.S. military used for nuclear testing during the Cold War after relocating the native inhabitants. And on the laundry list of objections Professor Barker has to the show are the fact that when the creator of SpongeBob passed away in 2018, there was no discussion in his obituary or otherwise about the, quote, normalization of colonial and military violence engendered through his cartoon depiction of Bikini Bottom, close quote. No, this isn't a parody account. This is an actual professor at a major university arguing that a cartoon sponge living in a place called Bikini Bottom was intended to depict the site of nuclear testing. Just spitballing here, but perhaps the writer of the cartoon about a sponge living in a pineapple under the sea lives in a place called Bikini Bottom because it's a humorous reference to the bottom part of a swimsuit, not because it's a reference to the site of a nuclear explosion. But setting that logic aside for a moment, what else does she object to? Well, she objects to cultural appropriation because of Hawaiian shirts worn in the cartoon. Gee, I wonder if her doctoral thesis was an attack on cultural appropriation by Magnum PI. How dare a Caucasian actor sporting the world's greatest mustache wear a Hawaiian shirt? And finally, she objects to the cartoon theme song referring to the area as being full of, quote, nautical nonsense, close quote. I would submit that her conclusions are full of academic nonsense. At a time when prominent candidates for the Democratic presidential nomination are talking about free college and a taxpayer bailout of student loan debt, somebody should ask at the next Democratic debate how this kind of lunacy qualifies as anything worthy of taxpayer support. Now, Professor Barker didn't say how she would have preferred the SpongeBob SquarePants theme song be worded, so I'll take a crack at something she might find more acceptable. Who lives in a testing site under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants, abhorrent and racist colonialist is he. SpongeBob SquarePants, if bigoted hatred be something you wish, SpongeBob SquarePants, then march across the deck like a militarist. SpongeBob SquarePants, SpongeBob SquarePants, SpongeBob SquarePants, SpongeBob SquarePants. I'll be back next week, and by the way, I will not be releasing that, as a single on the charts or going for the charts. I'll be back next week after recording my next episode in my podcast studio, not in a pineapple under the sea. Hopefully you'll join me, perhaps with your favorite Krabby Patty and a little liquid refreshment. In the interim, be sure to tell your friends about Political Spirits and like the podcast on Facebook at Political Spirits. And follow me and the podcast on Twitter at Franklin Rye. And I'm excited to announce that we're now on YouTube as well. The YouTube channel name is Political Spirits Network. I've uploaded all of the podcast episodes in 2 playlists on the channel, one for political commentary and news, and one for history, for those couple of episodes that are devoted only to history. Be sure to like and subscribe. And to those who've already subscribed on YouTube, welcome aboard. And thanks to all of you for being a part of Political Spirits. This is Franklin Rye. Thank you for listening.